Hello, hello. This is Michael Pusick once again on my fifth module reflection. Now, this time what we were talking about was how we gather information as sociologists and basically the concepts behind that and how things can kind of be moved around. This module is another one of those ones that I think is really interesting in that there's a lot that I feel like is in the popular consciousness that we kind of know that statistics can be changed a lot and things don't matter a lot. I mean, there's like a famous quote that's along the lines of like 3 deaths is like a tragedy, but 1,000 deaths is like a statistic. Um, and that is something that we as people have a hard time with dealing, dealing with. It's hard mostly because I think we just don't have a good way of um comprehending it. I mean, there's a whole term, innumenancy. I think I'm saying that right, which is pretty much we don't understand numbers as well when we see them. And a lot of statistics can be kind of played around with. Like there's an example in the text about how 150,000 people die from anorexia every year, but that's not actually what's going on. They found like how many people had anorexia, and they were saying like everyone who had it essentially died, but that's not really what happened. Because you can kind of play with statistics in a way that can kind of make your point how you feel like it just based on who's doing it. It's like having a scientific study where it's like, well, depending on who's paying for it, you're definitely getting a different result. It doesn't mean it's the most honest one. And we saw a lot more of this, I think, when we went into the um, GSS for the surveys for the project this module. And what I noticed from there, especially from the one I put forward, is that while you can try and just get random people for a survey, that doesn't mean you're getting an actual like precise group that's a good makeup of the actual population. Like one of the first surveys I actually put up there was literally for the reason of showing like, hey, this is saying the gender of the people taking the survey, and it doesn't match up with the actual gender ratios in the United States. And the reason I brought that up was because there's ways to kind of massage surveys and statistics in a way for you to get results that you kind of want. But moreover, what this module was about was the different ways that we can get it. For example, there's etymologic, which is when you're actually going forward. I think you actually had an example of going and working at a um, with a bunch of cyclists for a biking event and interviewing them. And that's an example of it where you're personally going and interviewing, you're living in like that kind of thing where you're dealing with the people who are there, you know, actually engaged in this life versus something like a survey where you hand someone a piece of paper and you have like press like go scratch the first one if you're this, scratch the second one if you're that. Like they all, there's a whole lot of different ways you can get information for statistics, and they all have pluses and minuses. And they also can take different amount of times. Like you can interview everyone individually and ask them questions. You might have a bit more accurate results than if you gave someone a survey. But the downside is how many people are you realistically going to interview versus how many people are you going to go and be able to give a survey. um, they'll have their pluses and minuses, and depending on what you do and how you do it, you can get kind of results you want in a certain way, and it may not be the most accurate thing, but it doesn't mean it's useless. It means that you need to kind of know how to read it and kind of understand what you're looking at, and it's it seems. You know what it reminds me a lot of is reading a political journal where you don't know who what side someone is on at first because their biases may show up in some ways in the way the survey can come out. And unless you kind of have an idea of what you're looking for, someone who doesn't know may go and just uh trump it as truth when it could be very misleading. And that is primarily what I was going over with for this whole thing. But yeah, this was definitely a very interesting module and one of my favorites. Bye.